Hello again. Welcome to our efforts to understand consciousness and hopefully finally the cosmic consciousness, because we are at the beginning, and in many cases philosophy is always at the beginning, has more questions than answers, and every answer opens up more questions. But that's the way it is. Okay, somebody mentioned in your replies to my talks that everything can be understood from the beginning as a point. Now, the point is part of the issue. Remember when we started talking about time question and with the classic understanding? Well, the time was divided into three parts: past, present, and future. And the present was understood as a point which divides past from future. But a division has no extension. It's simply a point of difference. So now the question is, what is a point if it has no extension? You have heard lots of scientists, astronomers talking about the Big Bang, and they're talking about infinitesimal point that exploded somehow. Now that infinitesimal point does not have is extended. Infinitesimal, but it is still extended, so you already have extension. Way back, philosophers like Zeno, at the time of classical thinkers, was asking a very unique question about a point. Now, his answer was very unique and quite funny. He says, well, let there be a race between a turtle and a rabbit. And he says, in our common understanding, the rabbit would leave the turtle in the dust. I mean, the rabbit is pretty fast in comparison to turtle. But Zeno says, not so fast. Let us say both are at a starting line. Now, before they reach the finish line, you have to go through half. Now, before they reach the half, they have to go through the fourth. Before they reach the fourth, they have to go through the eighth, and so on. Before they reach the 100th of the distance, they have to go half of that, and half of that. And no matter how far you go, you will still have to go half of what you have. So if you have 1/1,000,000th of a second, you will have to go half of that. And once you go half of that, you'll still have to go half of that. That means you can divide the stretch so far that you will never reach a starting point, because the starting point will have to be at infinity, and to reach that starting point as 0 point, it will take infinite time. So he says the race never starts. Okay, so fascinating. But that point we're talking about, that's a mathematical point at infinity, cannot give us extension, cannot have a stretch. In short, the now point, which is a difference between past and future, has no extension, and from no extension you cannot get extension. So that means that we already have an awareness, a consciousness of an extension that is not derived from the point. Okay. Now, another warning, I guess I didn't do it. What we're doing is, when we're searching for what is consciousness, maybe it's not even a what, we must remember that consciousness is distinct from anything we know about the world. Okay? For example, when we're talking about seeing a particular thing, let's say a material object, let's say a tree. Now, anyone, anywhere and anytime, to see the tree will have to see it not just from flat surface now, we will have to go around it to see the other side. Now, in terms of cause and effect, we have not yet been on the other side, which would cause us to want to see it. And yet we know consciously that this side means other sides, means other perspectives. So the understanding of the other side is already conscious understanding before we see it. Okay? And when we walk around, we form one perspective, which is a conscious way of seeing this side, and then we form other perspectives, seeing from other sides. Those perspectives are not a reality or a feature of anything. So to speak, I have a point from which I see the side. I move to the next point, another perspective. The previous perspective disappeared. It's a phenomenon, the way we access things, conscious phenomenon, the way we access material things. So we have to walk around things. That means we have a movement consciousness. Without that, we would not be able to say, I am expecting to see the other side if I walk around. So that means consciousness at the now point is already broader than the now point. Okay? The now point means there's a next point and a previous point. So we already have a broader consciousness than the now point. So what the point of this is, that consciousness is not identical nor is it derivable from the objects which we are conscious of. Okay? So now, another distinction, when we talk about time consciousness, it's different from consciousness of time. When we're talking about time, we're conscious of time. But our time consciousness is not an object. It is a time we live. So when we move around a thing and have time consciousness, that is, from here, I move to the next point, I have time consciousness, but not consciousness of time. So our quest for time consciousness is not identical with what scientists, with what others call time. Okay? Now, why is that important? Is because when we talked previously, that my time consciousness, including my memory, might be very short. Okay? So I remember things that happened 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. But as I mentioned, we extend our consciousness through others. Now we say, I understand how Newton invented or discovered the laws of gravity. I never met Newton, but I am aware of what Newton talked about. That is gravity. His talking about gravity was not gravity. He was aware of gravity and the mathematics which were used to formulate the laws of gravity. So now I'm with Newton. He is extending my awareness of the laws of the world, which I by myself never discovered. So thanks to him, I can talk about gravity and its laws. So now I am intersubjective. In short, our awareness is not limited to my own or our own memories. our awareness is extended across time. Okay. So now another point is this. If we were beings like individuals that we are, and we are happy to be individuals, and we're happy to be democratic with individual rights, but then the question arises, as individuals and empirical physical beings, and that is what we are by all sciences and by all the creation theories. But then as individual physical human beings, we are located at the present. It's like any physical thing cannot get out of the present. The tree is now. The tree does not have past or future as a thing. So now, if we were the thing, a material being, just purely material, or even mental, and we'll deal with psychological later on, we are at present. And so Newton, as individual material being, has some kind of brain functions and whatever else we have, physiological presence. And if that's the case, how do I and we understand Newton in face of the fact that we never were at that time and at a moment when he was talking about apples and gravity and all of that? How do we transfer his, so to speak, being as a real material thing to be aware of what he was thinking physically in the brain to ourselves, which are very different time, different space? How is that transference possible by us or for us when we are here and now as physical creatures? In short, we will never be able to meet Newton, and even if we met Newton, it would be impossible to have the same awareness because he is at that time next to me in a slightly different space and time location. So there is no way to communicate between us. We cannot transfer our brain waves one to the other. Okay? It is like saying, the light waves striking his retina, according to science, are very different from the light waves striking my retina. So we have no way at that level of explanation of consciousness as physiological, physical, to understand how we can communicate. Besides, I have never felt like Newton does, my psychology, so to speak. Maybe I don't have any feelings. I'm a very cool cat. Newton might have been very furious and angry at things. Well, there is no communication between us. Above all, there is no communication physically, empirically, between me and what happened in Newton's times to Newton. Okay? But yet we're talking as if we understood each other. What kind of consciousness is involved to make that gap, that temporal distance between us and spatial difference between us? So that means we have intersubjective awareness, which defies or does not need our time awareness as sequential. Newton is gone in the past. He was done, and I am now, and we are now. So how do we have that awareness which defies our conception of time? That means we have to understand time very differently. That is, time awareness and not awareness of time. My time awareness is with Newton, as is yours, as we're talking about Newtonian discovery of gravity and the laws of gravity. We're talking the way Newton talked. And yet physically, we have never been in touch with Newton. And we, even if, as I mentioned, even if we were in touch with Newton, we would be in different space and time locations. So there is no communication. And yet we communicate. We understand Newton. We understand Galileo and his great discoveries through a telescope and all of that. That we are circling around the earth and not the sun. I'm sorry, we're circling around the sun and not the sun circling around us. Now, the wonder of wonders is we give credit, let's say, to Galileo, to having discovered the so-called heliocentric, and that is that we swing around the sun. Now, empirically, we have never seen that. We get up in the morning and the sun could be covered up by your hat, is as small as that. So how do we say empirically, directly, in empirical perception, visual, that it is not the sun going around the earth, but the earth is going around the sun? What kind of awareness must we have? What kind of consciousness to make that claim, which empirically we can never have? Okay. Every morning we get up, the sun gets up. Every morning it sets in the west in the evening. We have to shift our awareness to something that is not, in quotes, empirical. So that's one point. That means we have to shift time awareness. And that awareness, time awareness, means that we have to add something that is not empirical. Very nice. So what did we add that is not empirical? We added, from the time of classical philosophy, we added that we can measure. Even Newton, when he discovered, in quotes, gravity, he had to invent a way to measure it. So now, in modern age, we invented, as I mentioned, measurement, which is mathematical. Fantastic. And Galileo said, with mathematics, we know so much that we should be envious of ourselves concerning our great knowledge. Okay? We have now mathematical awareness. Now, next thing, remember, the awareness is not identical with the object of awareness. So now, when we deal with mathematics, it is impossible to have mathematical awareness as if it were a thing awareness. As I mentioned, we walk around things. We see things from different perspectives. But we cannot walk around 2 + 2 = 4 to see how it looks from the other side. Numbers, mathematical formulations, have no sides. In short, I cannot invite you to say, well, from my perspective, 2 + 2 looks this way. How does 2 + 2 look from your perspective? There is no way to have a perspective. You see the same formula, 2 + 2 is 4. So now, the issue here is that in our intersubjective awareness, we introduce something that remains constant, permanent. Okay? We have many ways of dealing with the same thing, yet our communication requires that we address the same thing. Okay? And what is the same thing? that goes across ages. As I mentioned last time, well, we talk about imagination. We talk about an image. And we discovered, so to speak, that despite our changing lives, our getting older, or get rejuvenated, getting younger, more athletic through exercise, we change. And yet when somebody shows you an image, says, this is me 20 years ago, I have never seen this person 20 years ago, but the image on a flat surface, glossy paper, can be yesterday, can be the day after tomorrow. It is the same image. It hasn't changed. So the question is, in what time and in what space is this image, and what consciousness can identify the same image despite the fact that we changed and despite the fact that the image must remain the same, identical. So, where are we? At the level of consciousness. I mean, our environment changes. The wind scatters the leaves and all of that, and yet when we talk consciously, in a conscious way, we encompass dimensions and objects of awareness which defy our space-time understanding. And that means there is an indication that consciousness is very different from space-time things. Okay? So that's the point is that when we're dealing with awareness or consciousness, sometimes I call awareness because consciousness is a very loaded term, we're dealing with dimension of human life which is not understandable in any physiological, material, maybe even psychological or even mental awareness. The reason I say mental awareness because in modern age, we live in modern West, we have invented a mind which is mathematical. Now, mathematical mind, that is, we see everything in terms of numbers, in terms of sizes and quantities or magnitudes. So that mathematical awareness cannot give us space and time. Now we're dealing just with time, cannot give us time awareness because mathematics are not temporal. Okay? Like I say, you can repeat the same mathematical formula as you repeat the same image, irrespective of time or space. So how can we say that we can measure the past, which is gone, by using mathematics? Well, mathematics is not a measure. You cannot, so to speak, extend a stick into the past with numbers on it. How many years? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You put down on this measuring stick and stick it into the past and say now 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. There is no way to measure the past. Okay, so mathematics is somewhat in trouble. Another feature of mathematical thinking is that any mathematical point is unextended. So no matter where do you place mathematics, it does not say that it has any extension. 2 is no more extended than 1. 2 points collapse into 1 point. Okay? You cannot say I'm measuring mathematically the size of a particular thing, but mathematics, purely left by themselves, have no extension. So while we are talking, and scientists are doing the same thing, that we can measure the past mathematically, well, they have no way to account for how do we get extension. If time is extended, let's say past is extended from now to 13 billion years ago, if there's an extension, numbers have no extension. So how do you apply unextended things to measure something that is extended? That too is an issue for mathematics. In short, science is good. It does lots of good for us, but its explanations, using its methods, such as let us to look at the world mathematically, cannot be applied to simple things as extended time. That past is extended from now till 13 billion years ago. Sure. What are we measuring? Because the next point is, well, if the past is no longer, what are you measuring? By your numbers, or by the so-called measuring stick that you stick in the past, which is no longer. There's nothing there. So how can you say we're measuring the past and at the same time say past is no longer? Here we again are stuck in an issue. The same thing can be thought about future. Say, well, future is not yet, and so we extend some sort of a measure toward the future. If it does not, it's not yet, it doesn't exist. So how do we stick out that measuring stick toward the future which is not there? It has no reality. What are we measuring? Emptiness? Well, there was, I will get to the Eastern thought later, but one of the people called the second Buddha, Nagarjuna, in India, was raising the question whether there is causality, cause and effect. Now, we do a lot of talking that way, well, my past caused me to be what I am. In short, sometimes people talk, boy, was I bad in the past, now the past is catching up to me. I was a drunkard and I ruined my liver. Being a drunkard in the past is catching up to me, and now I'll have to have a liver operation. Well, past is catching up to you. Okay? But Nagarjuna argues very strictly, but if we say that past is no longer, then it is not there, and therefore it cannot be a cause. Cause assumes linear time. Past, present, and future. Past causes the present. But on the account that the present is all there is, past is no longer, then you have to give up that past causes anything. In fact, he said, when we talk about past as having causes for the present, we are talking empty language. We're not saying anything. It is convenient, and lots of languages are convenient. And that's good. We can at least think that we are communicating. But when you push the thing to philosophical question, that means that if past is gone, past cannot be a cause. So all the scientific talk about Big Bang having caused all kinds of events, well, it's no longer. And no matter how far you slice it, well, of course, the Big Bang is gone, but what it caused is still there. Well, what it caused is also yesterday is gone. So causality becomes, so to speak, a mystery. But it's convenient to talk. To speak in terms of consciousness as freedom, and we'll deal with that. then when we want to explain things by causes, what we're doing is using causes as excuses for our freedom. We don't want to be free, so we use explanations. Okay? Once we use explanations, then we are not responsible for what we do. Okay? Well, we get to the consciousness of freedom and time awareness. Next thing that becomes an issue is what kind of identities we can repeat and where are they? You see, we are usually using a fascinating language. Where is it? Okay? Or when was it, or when is it? Sort of, we're looking for locations. Okay? So when we say we have a mathematical formulation, let's say law of gravity or 2 + 2 = 4, we want to find, well, we're thinking about 2 + 2 = 4, thinking about something. So that something must be, in quotes, somewhere. After all, if it's nowhere, how can you talk about it? And yet we're talking about it, and we cannot find where it is or when it is. Anytime you say 2 + 2 = 4, it is forever. Whether it was Newton who talked that way, Galileo, whether it was the mathematicians in Inca Empire, the Latin American great empire, they were talking the same way. So where is 2 + 2 = 4? The point is, we're asking the wrong question. It is not in our commonly understood space and time. It is nowhere and everywhere, not at no time and at all times. Now, when we try to find its location, we will not find it, although we assume it that we are aware of this object 2 + 2 = 4. So we have to understand that there is a dimension in our world which is consciousness, which deals with these objects. And in fact, every scientist will claim that what is most objective about our understanding is mathematics. And at the same time, it's a contradiction, because when we talk about what is objective in science, we're talking about physical things, the only objectivity. And yet when we say physical things are contingent, they might not have any kind of necessity, but mathematical awareness is necessary. Okay? So here we have mathematics as an object of consciousness, which we say is the most objective, but at the same time, we allow in our sciences that only objectivity is physical. So here we introduce consciousness as mathematical. We're aware of mathematics, which are just as objective, more objective than physical things, and yet we say they are not in physical reality. And they cannot be. But they are objects of consciousness. So once again, to ask the question, where are they or when are they, becomes redundant. In short, we're opening up awareness which is not identical with our time awareness. Okay. Now, and that means that as conscious being, or beings, all of us, I hope we are conscious. Some scientists say there is no consciousness. They explain consciousness. We'll see how they do that and suppress it, and it becomes a very dangerous explanation. Makes us unconscious and not conscious beings, and therefore not responsible for what we do. Once you explain consciousness, you, so to speak, excuse it from any responsibility. You subject it to the laws of gravity, laws of mechanics and all of that, and suddenly we are non-conscious beings and we don't know what we're doing. Okay. Good. Now, next thing that has to be addressed, equally question of consciousness, and that is that when we're talking about vision, I see things, we all see things. I see this thing from one side, from another side, from top, from bottom. Now I see the same thing. Now, but when we explain vision in terms of specific, well, we call them light waves, okay? We say that we see a tree because there is a set of light waves, or our set of light waves, which strike our physical apparatus, and that is our eyeballs, our retina, to be specific. Okay, so that means the way we see is, are conscious of a tree, is because there are light waves, and each one has specific frequency. Okay, but I'm a scientist, so now assume a scientific attitude and be very strict and precise. And that means, to be precise, maybe we should turn to philosophy. So when we measure the light waves, we cannot do so in terms of light waves that strike our retina. So then, how do we measure light waves which have not yet struck our retina? Because the only way we don't see before the light waves strike our retina. So now I'm a scientist measuring light waves before they struck my retina. So what kind of light allows me to illuminate the light waves before they strike my retina? Aha, there is, so to speak, illuminating consciousness with its own light, which does not depend on light waves. It would be impossible to measure light waves before they strike my retina, and yet we say we measure them. In light of what? That means that there is, to speak metaphorically, consciousness that illuminates things that are in light, but not in light waves. So there is another dimension, so to speak, more illuminating than light waves. Now, I'm using light metaphor because that's all our tradition has, in light of awareness, in light of reason, in light of understanding. Now, these are lights which are not light waves. And yet we are, in fact, talk about that light, those lights, so to speak, in light of reason, in light of understanding, and so on. That enlightenment is consciousness, and not physiological light waves striking on our retina and producing images in our brain. So we'll have to address. In fact, if you read astronomy and current explanations, you will find precisely what I'm saying. They introduce consciousness, light consciousness, before light was invented, before physical light was invented. And what do they say is this? After Big Bang, we'll deal with that Big Bang. It's a very fascinating story. But they say before Big Bang, there appeared a light. Now, before galaxies were formed, before stars were formed. Now, remember, when we talk about light waves, striking our retina, we're talking about light waves produced by the sunlight. Okay? But they were already talking that there was light before there were stars. That means before there was sunlight. So what light are we talking about? Not the light stemming from the stars and from our sun, or from reflected by the moon at night. So we are, I guess, seeking some sort of enlightenment. And that enlightenment is premised on a consciousness which is not dependent on, although it is aware of the world, of the things in the world. We're aware of trees, we're aware of cucumbers, aware of physical laws, but our awareness of them is not part of them. Okay? You see, when we talked about consciousness such as rational consciousness, dealing with ideas, such as mathematical ideas. Now, when we say our rational consciousness made a mistake, what kind of consciousness understands the rational consciousness and the mistake? So to speak, there appears, fascinating, so to speak, a flash of illumination. My reason made a mistake. So there's a reason, and I see that reason as having made mistakes. So what is this consciousness that sees rational consciousness and the mistakes that it can make? So now we are back again. Consciousness of rational consciousness is not rational. It doesn't mean it's irrational, but it is constantly present or co-present that illuminates even irrationality and maybe its limits. So here we are, again facing answers which pose more questions than we have at present, in quotes at present. So next time, I guess we'll continue and raise the question of what kind of temporality, in quotes, this constantly appearing consciousness possesses. Now, we talked about intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity, so to speak, offers to extend our awareness into sort of greater depth. Like I mentioned, we'll talk with Newton about gravity, with Galileo about a heliocentric world, Copernican world, and all of that. And we talked about the ideas that Plato offered. Now, they helped us extend our consciousness. And psychiatrists like Carl Jung call this collective unconscious. But I would sort of make a slight disagreement by saying, if it is collective unconscious, then we would not be conscious of it. But since we're conscious of it, it's already no longer unconscious. So we are part of that intersubjective consciousness which extends our awareness. and we'll see if that is adequate to understand cosmic consciousness. So thank you very much for your participation and your attention, and we shall speak again pretty soon. Bye.